International cruises will begin to operate from Australia next month, and Australian media outlets have a slow week and decide to focus on cruising for all the wrong reasons. I'm Adrian, the Cruise and Travel Guy. As always, thank you for subscribing to my channel, and if you haven't done so yet, please hit that subscribe button. Global crew shortages are finally beginning to ease, with Carnival Cruise Lines confirming that the US government have been instrumental in allowing crew members to join their ships before their visas have actually been approved. The shortages had impacted multiple cruise lines around the world, with many having no choice but to limit onboard offerings and services in line with their reduced number of staff. Carnival will be reinstating its chef's table experience and anticipate that they'll be back to full staffing levels by the end of the month. So far, this particular issue hasn't affected cruise ships sailing from Australia. Coral Princess was the first Princess cruise ship to begin sailing from Australia after the cruise ban was lifted. She kicked things off just last month, sailing exclusively from Brisbane. This week, news of COVID cases on board Coral Princess began to circulate through Australian media outlets, and those same organisations that were in complete support of the restart just weeks ago were once again recalling the Ruby Princess as they recounted the story of an outbreak. I was truly disappointed to witness the media pylon. From news articles and TV segments, the messaging was taking me all the way back to the early part of 2020. Many journalists were quick to point to the cruise industry as some sort of ticking time bomb, with many of course defaulting to the analogous rhetoric of the floating petri dish. As of the end of this week, there were a reported 128 cases of COVID on board Coral Princess, 14 of those being passengers. Each case was identified on board as a result of Princess Cruises' own health protocols, and each affected passenger was subsequently isolated in line with the procedures. I don't want to diminish the experience of anyone that has caught COVID, whether that be on land, at the shops, on a plane, or on a cruise. But the reality of living in this time and day that we do is that we all assume this risk the moment we leave home. We have come to accept that we are stuck, at least for the foreseeable future, of the concept of living with COVID. For all of us, it's part of our everyday life to some degree. The vast majority of Australians are vaccinated, and those of us that feel comfortable doing so will wear masks in crowded environments or avoid them altogether. 50,000 people attended the football midweek, and as it should be, none were required to take a COVID test before entering or provide proof of vaccination. Are we supposed to believe that there was not one case of COVID amongst that crowd, or that not one person walked out of that stadium that night after getting it? No one, whether from the media or the event organizers, would be able to give us any health statistics about the spectators before or after that night. Cruising's downfall in some strange way is that they are so diligent about protecting their crew and passengers. The only reason there's a story here at all is because cruise lines are, to the best of their ability, mitigating the risk of contracting COVID on board their ships. They know who's walking on, they know their state of health, and they know who's walking off. That's the only reason there's a statistic here, and that's the only reason there's a story here. We'll continue to keep an eye on the Coral Princess, of course, especially now as its current cruise comes to a conclusion. The biggest issue facing the cruise line is that the number of crew affected with COVID will inevitably have some kind of impact on the onboard experience for guests. Until something official comes from Princess though, it's just a matter of waiting and seeing. Earlier this week, while I was away in the Blue Mountains for a few days, I recorded my own short response to the media pylon and was subsequently contacted by Sky News to join one of their anchors live on air to discuss cruising. It was my very first interview, so half of what I wanted to say never quite made it out of my mouth, but I was honored to attempt to represent the cruise industry and help explain why it really is one of the safest ways to travel in 2022. Moving on, P&O will become the first cruise line to sail internationally from Australia next month. Pacific Explorer's August 8th departure was originally scheduled to sail to Mystery Island and New Caledonia. Instead, the ship will become the first cruise to call in at Auckland, officially marking the return of cruising to New Zealand. The ship and her passengers will then sail on to Fiji, where they will be welcomed into the country that only weeks ago lifted its ban on cruising. It's fantastic to see the next stage of cruising is finally here, with the horizons expanding far beyond our own domestic borders. In line with its commitment to allow cruising to return to its state, Western Australia will officially welcome large cruise ships from October 1st. The return comes in line with the beginning of the Australian peak cruise season, and just before the country welcomes cruise ships from Royal Caribbean, Celebrity, NCL, Holland America, and more. And finally this week, Royal Caribbean's 6th Oasis class ship is officially under construction. A keel laying ceremony took place at the French shipyard where Utopia of the Seas will eventually be completed. The ship will enter service with the line in 2024 and she'll be the second vessel for the cruise line to be powered by the relatively clean, liquefied natural gas. Well, that's about it for this week's cruise news update. Wherever you are, I hope you're enjoying the return of cruising. If you haven't done so already, you can give me a follow on Facebook and Instagram at The Cruise and Travel Guy. And if you are looking to book a cruise, you can search and book online from my website, thecruiseandtravelguy.com.au. Thanks for watching and I'll see you soon. They've actually allowed crew members to join their ships before their visas have been approved, and while they're on board, those paperwork things will come through and be done. It's cool. The messaging and emotive language, with of course the default rhetoric of the analogy, means that they will inevitably